Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is Comedic Pedro, 1974. You can see I'm wearing a Cleveland Browns t-shirt. I turned 14 in 1974, and Cleveland sports was my obsession, my main interest in life. And the Cleveland Indians baseball team were number one. I was very traditional. I was baseball one, and my second team was the Browns, the Cleveland Browns, in the NFL, the National Football League. And of course, you just go from season to season and follow the teams. And I was a big Browns fan, and still am all these years. And back in the '70s, they weren't so great. I think they pretty much had losing seasons. The late '80s, tremendous. They had a tremendous run with Bernie Kosar. I'll always be very beloved for me and I think a lot of people. Got the 3 AFC title games in the late '80s, and then of course I was overseas when they moved. That very painful thing back in 1995, and actually I missed a lot of when the new Browns came back 20 years ago, 1999. Yeah, and I missed a lot of those seasons. Most of them weren't that good. But it's fun now. It's fun now being a Browns fan. I enjoy it. It's real different from being a baseball fan, where they play almost every day. It's just football is just once a week, Sunday, and it's very intense, And for me, being a Cleveland Browns fan, the color orange is very important. And, those orange helmets. And, when the offense is on the field and and they're moving in the right direction with the ball, I feel good. Actually, I was downtown Cleveland, and with the new stadium, it's not new now, it's 20 years old, First Energy Stadium. When you take the bus downtown from the west side, you can see inside, and depending on the light, I always enjoy looking at those orange seats. It's pretty cool. It gives me a thrill, because the color orange, they're called the Browns, really named after Paul Brown, but the orange is the color that's most identified with the team, because the helmets are orange. And and actually at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you can see into it's cool. You can see from that eating area upstairs, you can see through the glass, it's a glass, you can see into the stadium, see those orange seats, as well as the Terminal Tower. Now back in the '70s, early on, it was Mike Phipps was the quarterback, but then it became Brian Sipe, pretty much, who became very effective and led the team in 1980 when the Cardiac Kids. I was actually in college at the time, and I think we were on vacation in the Bahamas, so I kind of missed that exciting season. Greg Pruitt was probably my favorite player. He was the running back, little guy, and he had the tearaway jerseys where the guys would try to grab them, and the jersey would break, and they'd have to be holding a piece of jersey, and they banned that because of Greg Pruitt. So now you can grab a guy by his jersey and get him down. Tremendous player. He got like 200 yards rushing in a game. The thing, and back then, the games were played in the fall. We had a big yard, a lot of leaf raking in the fall, and my dad and I would rake leaves, and then usually on Sundays would be a Saturday weekend would be a time to rake leaves. So I don't know if all the games were on TV, but sometimes I have a very fond memory of being out in the yard raking leaves in our home on Avalon Drive in Rocky River with my father. We'd had a transistor radio, and we'd put that on the ground nearby and be raking and listening to the game on the radio. It was fun. Multitasking. And that was actually more fun than watching it on TV. And as we would move around the yard raking leaves, we kept moving that radio so we could hear. Really fun. Yeah, and they used to have these, and some of these little, where they, like a gumball machine. They had you put a quarter in or 2 quarters, and they used to have where you could get these mini NFL helmets. I thought those were real cool, and I got a few of those. And I had it in my bathroom where I was growing up. I had somehow I got a hand towel that had all the the names of the teams on it. I thought that was so cool. I had it in my bathroom. And I used to watch Monday Night Football. As a kid, the game started late. Started at 9 and would finish at midnight, so I'd usually watch the first half. So I enjoyed watching Howard Cosell, those 3 guys doing Monday Night Football. Howard Cosell, Dandy Don Meredith, and Frank Gifford. And so, yeah, back in the, we didn't go to many Browns games, very few, partly because I didn't pressure my father. I didn't ask him to go, because it's kind of intimidating. It's not like a relaxing game watching the Indians, Brown football games, you get big crowd, and the other thing is the elements. I haven't been to a Browns game since I think maybe 1988, something like that. I remember, and because sometimes I think about going, but I guess the time to go would be in September. I think because when it gets so cold, you're down there and you're just. I think that would be tough. And remember, 1988, my dad called me up. His law firm had season tickets, and then they would have this once a year, the big client, State Farm Insurance. They'd have these fellows from there, and my mom would go. And one year my father called me, and he said, "Pete, we have an extra ticket. Would you like to come?" So I drove downtown, and I met my father outside of Gate A at the Cleveland Municipal Stadium, and then we were going to go in. And while we were out, I said, "Oh, Dad, let's go to the, let's relieve our bladders." And because it's hard, that's one of the challenges of going to a game, because they didn't have many bathrooms. So we went in the parking lot, and we were there, peeing in the parking lot. And I made a joke. I said, "Oh, Dad, here comes the cops." So he quickly, got himself arranged, and he got some urine on his pants, which was pretty mean trick of me. And but he and the police weren't there, and he took it well. He didn't get mad like, "Pete, what the hell?" So that was kind of funny. And I went, actually, my friend Brent last night. Yeah, we went one Monday night football game, 1986. It was so cool. Browns were a tremendous team back then, and we saw the. The Browns beat the Dolphins, who had Dan Marino and Cleveland Bernie Kosar, who had a big game. It was really exciting. It was the only time I went to a Monday night football game, 86. And Brent and I, we were at that playoff game in actually January of 87. Browns-Jets went into double overtime, and we won that game. Oh, very exciting. And the fans were leaving, near in the fourth quarter when the Browns went down by, I think, 10. Fans were leaving, and then they came running back when they got to their cars and found out that the Browns tied it late and, again, won it in double overtime. Very exciting. Yeah, so, it's really, it's fun being, I watch the games Sundays because it's only once a week, and each game is so important. It's not like a baseball game or basketball, one game. Okay. If you win a game in the NFL, it's a big deal because they only play, they don't play that many games. So that's been fun being a Cleveland Browns fan over the years. Now, so now on the cover of the video, or the cover photo, is from the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was aired from 1970 to 1977, 168 episodes, and it's the story of a character named Mary Richards, played by Mary Tyler Moore, who is an unmarried, independent woman who focuses on her career as an associate producer at a fictional TV news program, WJW, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And the characters include Ed Asner plays the character Lou Grant, who is her boss. Valerie Harper played her friend, named Rhoda Morgenstern. Cloris Leachman played her landlady, Phyllis, and then Gavin McLeod played her, the news writer, Murray Slaughter, who was like her co-worker. Ted Knight played the buffoonish anchorman, Ted Baxter. He was a really funny guy. And then there's a TV cooking show hostess, Sue Ann Nivens, played by Betty White, who I think she still had a very long career. There were 3 spin-offs from the Mary Tyler Moore Show: Rhoda, Phyllis, and Lou Grant. And there's it's a wonderful show. They had I believe in the opening sequence, it shows her scenes of her, and there's a song and the great line, "Looks like you're gonna make it after all." I didn't sing that very well. Looks like you're gonna make... And she throws her beret in the air, her hat. It's like wintertime. She throws her hat in the air. She's looking up, and it's wonderful. And apparently I've heard friend Brent Lesheim's sister Lolita lives in Minneapolis, and they have a statue of her throwing her hat in the air. And she's happy because her life's going well. And then according to Entertainment Weekly, that's the second greatest moment in television history. And then the other really nice line in that song is she can turn the world on with her smile. Yeah, she can turn the world on with her smile. So this was really a wonderful TV show and I think it inspired a lot of women back then. Because traditionally women, I think, had been frustrated being limited to being housewives, cooking and cleaning, or just the two careers of nursing and teaching. So this was, and in the 70s, things really changed. I think in the United States, where women started doing a lot of different things and finding fulfillment and being able to contribute to our country. And so I'm sure this show was inspired women to become what they call career girls. What they used to call career women. And this was, her character. She was such a nice person. She was kind, and she was ambitious, and she was responsible, and she was working hard. But she was a good person, so she was very endearing. She was and she was strong. And then her friend, relationships. Her boss, Lou Grant. Yeah, he was kind of gruff, but kind inside. And her friend, this guy, what's his name? The Murray Slaughter. Yeah, he was a good guy. They were co-workers. And her friend Rhoda. Rhoda's a real nice gal, good friend. So it was a wonderful TV show. And I think, really, really memorable. And worth checking out if you're interested. Now, in 1974, the world events. On January 15th, Happy Days, the TV show had its first episode. And that was sort of a nostalgic look at the 1950s, or set in the 1950s. February 4th, Patricia Hearst, who was from this wealthy family, was kidnapped in Berkeley, California by the Symbionese Liberation Army. And she had such a tough time. She was captive, and then she kind of got brainwashed and ended up, sort of going along with their radical agenda, trying to foment revolution. And then eventually she got arrested, caught, and then a long trial. She went through a lot. I really had to feel for her, and the public thought, oh, what is she doing? The public thought, she really took a lot. And eventually she served some time in prison because, she actually participated in a bank robbery. On March 4th, the People magazine, the first issue, came out with Mia Farrow on the cover. Yeah, that's, I think, still around. On the 29th, the Terracotta Army, these stone soldiers, were discovered in Xi'an, China. I think these were underground. They're still a big tourist attraction. On April 8th, Henry Aaron hit his 715th career home run and passed Babe Ruth, become the all-time home run king. It was a big moment, yeah, and he faced a lot of racism and threats. In fact, as he was running the bases, people said if you break Babe's record, because Aaron was black, and very sad. And of course, Babe Ruth was very beloved. He said as he was running the bases, he expected to get shot and killed. So because if he didn't touch home plate, that he would wouldn't count as a home run. But of course, thankfully he wasn't. Thank God he wasn't shot. And after he scored, his mother came out in the field, and she knew about the threats against his life, and she gave him a big hug. And she thought, well, she was thinking she could protect him, in case he was shot. Oh, horrible. But anyway, Henry Aaron, and they called him Hank. I think he likes to be called Henry. Ended up with 755 home runs. Later, that was broken by Barry Bonds. On the 15th of the month, Patricia Hearst was photographed carrying an M1 carbine in a bank robbery in San Francisco. Yeah, and the public was hard on her. Didn't understand. She'd been sort of, you could say, brainwashed. It was very, very, very tragic. May 24th, the famous musician Duke Ellington died at age 75. Famous, I believe, jazz musician and a singer and a saxophone player, I believe. On June 4th, here in Cleveland, 10-cent beer night was held. They'd had these more than once, but on this particular night, there was a riot. The fans rioted, and I think they were smoking marijuana. They stormed the field. I was listening to the game on the radio, yeah. And eventually, the Herb Score and Joe Tate calling the game on the radio, they didn't want to. Eventually, they were exasperated with what was going on, and eventually the fans stormed the field, and the Indians forfeited that game. Lost, so they couldn't finish. We had a rally in the ninth. I think we had like the tying run. We were losing, but the tying run was on base, and yeah, it was terrible, crazy. And yeah, they actually sell T-shirts about that, and they never had 10-cent beer night again. They thought this is no good, horrible. It was really July 7th, West Germany won the World Cup, defeating the Netherlands. Yeah, West Germany. This is in the old days when Germany was a divided country. On August 9th, U.S. President Richard Nixon resigned due to the Watergate scandal, all this which had been ongoing. And Gerald Ford, his vice president, became the new president. So that was the end of Richard Nixon's time in office. Yeah, so that was really something. Yeah, really unfortunate the way that all played out. And anyway, September 10th, independence came for Guinea-Bissau in West Africa from Portugal. Yeah, it's funny. There's an interesting number of countries have similar names. There's actually a country called Guinea and Guinea-Bissau, and in South America, the Guyanas, Guyana, British Guyana, French Guyana, and Dutch Guyana, which have new names now, except for British Guyana is Guyana, and Dutch Guyana's Suriname. French Guyana still is the same. Anyway. So let's see. On the 12th of September, Haile Selassie was deposed in Ethiopia, the longtime emperor of that country in East Africa, who was worshipped by the Rastafari religious people in Jamaica, and who had inspired the reggae music popularized by Bob Marley and others. When Ethiopia defeated Italy when it invaded in 1936, but here it was many years later, he was overthrown in a military coup. October 3rd, the Rumble in the Jungle took place, a famous heavyweight title boxing match in Zaire, which was named that by the dictator Mobutu Sese Seko, or Joseph Mobutu. Muhammad Ali defeated George Foreman. I remember that. That was in the Rumble, and they made a movie, Ali, where he was running out jogging, and he inspired these people in Central Africa, I think all over Africa. Okay, November 24th, the skeleton Lucy was discovered, 3.2 million years old. And I believe that's here in Cleveland at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. They call it a hominid, or it's like a human-like thing. Talk about a long time ago, and apparently got the name because they were listening to the Beatles song "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds" when it was discovered. The 28th of November, John Lennon and Elton John appeared together and performed at Madison Square Garden in New York City. Of course, Madison Square, named after James Madison, the founder of the father of U.S. Constitution. This supposedly was John Lennon's final public appearance. Now, things that happened on unknown dates in 1974 include the Dungeons & Dragons, a tabletop role-playing game, was released. That's become still very popular. And Pepsi became the first company to sell American products in the Soviet Union. Now, in our family, my father, both my parents, John Ray and Ruth Ray, turned 50 years old. In 1974, my father got involved in the Peter Beebe Episcopal Church court case. And in the Episcopal Church, women had been allowed to go to seminary, but they were not allowed to become ordained as priests in the Episcopal Church. And so this Peter Beebe in Oberlin, Ohio, he decided to celebrate communion with these women who were unordained but had been to seminary. And he got in big trouble with the church, and there was a trial. And after 2 years, they finally won. And the ban on women becoming Episcopal ministers was dropped, and so this meant that women could be Episcopal ministers. And this was I was 14. I remember going to some of these things, the get-togethers, and there were court things. And Peter Beebe my father was a big hero, big major player, and Peter Beebe. And I remember once in a while they would say, "Hey Peter," and I was like, "Oh." But they weren't talking to me. I was just this dorky 14-year-old kid who was just there and kind of really out of it, and because I was depressed. But this was and my father, again, the parents were mourning. Their daughter had died. Pamela had died 3 years before, and they used to. Pam was such an outgoing person. I know both my parents thought, oh well, if Pam had wanted to be a minister, an Episcopal minister, she should have had that opportunity, because she would have been a wonderful minister, because she was very kind and very service oriented. And so this was partly they did this for her and for all women. And so that was a big deal. Yeah, and Oberlin, and my brother Mark was at Oberlin in college at the time. So yeah, that my parents, they were still hurting. They were still hurting from the loss of my sister. And my father, yeah, he was not paid anything. You know, this Peter Beebe, my father came, my parents went and to this, I think a time when these women, you know, were doing something that was illegal in the Episcopal Church. In other words, they were, you know, giving communion, participating as ministers. And somehow my father was talking to Peter Beebe, and my dad offered his services as lawyer, and on the condition that he would not be paid, because he just wanted to do it pro bono. He got in some trouble with his law partners who didn't appreciate this, because this was legal work that wasn't bringing in money to the firm. And they were Catholic, and Catholics don't have women priests. And and in his own church, in St. Peter's Episcopal Church in Lakewood, Ohio, so there was opposition among the people there. But you know, they went on, and actually later, eventually, St. Peter's has had women ministers as a result of this case and my father's efforts. Gay Jennings, who was a very kind woman, and also Carol Flanagan. And okay, so now my brother Mark turned 22. He was at Oberlin College, and this was his 4th year. He should have been getting ready to graduate, but he was he was on the 5-year plan. So Mark was at Oberlin, and yeah, he remembers that Peter Beebe case, and yeah, he was a young man trying to find himself in the world, working on his English degree, very interested in spirituality and religion as well. Of course, Pamela was in heaven, our sister. She'd been there in heaven for 3 years, died on April 11th, 1971, so age 16 and 10 months. So you know, we don't know what she was doing, but she was still our sister, and you know, still a wonderful person. And I know both my parents, you know, now they're gone, so hopefully they've seen her. They've gotten together. Now my sister Patricia, she turned 17. And that year, and she was in the first 6 months, she was in grade 10 at the high school, Rocky River High School, and then in the fall, grade 11. And she was into music. She played the piano and the violin, and I know she was really missing Pamela, her older sister, who was gone. Very good student, and she was a very outstanding student, and I know music was very important to her, classical music, and she also got involved with AFS, and then this thing called something to do with swimming and dancing. I can't come up what they call Catalinas or something. Anyway, Patricia turned 17. I turned 14. I was finished up at the junior high the first 6 months of the year, and then in the fall I was a freshman at the high school, grade 9. And yeah, Patty and I used to walk to school sometimes, I think, a fair amount, and we'd pick up her friend, Mary Faulkner, on the way, what they called Jinx. Yeah, so that's the story of 1974, Comedic Pedro, and the year in my life. And anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care. And I'll see you next time.